So I've been putting on YouTube shorts about the first season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and I've been getting some pretty good numbers from that, including have one video having over 10,000 views and counting. It's continuing to go up. And so at this point I'm like, why am I not doing this already? I need to put out a video talking about the first season, because clearly people want to hear what I have to say about this series, and the fact of the matter is, I want to talk about it. And YouTube Shorts are not always the best way to do that. So without further ado, this is a review for the first season, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I have read the book multiple times, so I know what happens in the book. In fact, before watching the series, I had just finished reading through the first 5 books again. So I was up to date and I remember every little detail going into it. So keep that in mind when I'm going into this, is that I have it fresh in my head what happened in the books going into the series. Let's start with the first episode, the pilot. For the most part, every change they made to this first episode, I felt like took away from the story. For example, it just pushes past the whole thing with Mr. Brenner and Grover just gaslighting Percy into believing what he saw wasn't real, but it also kind of makes sense why they couldn't really do much with that. Even they did some of like, what are you talking about? They did less with that because in the original story, and what works about the original story with this, is that in the original, they make it so Mrs. Dodds takes him into a separate area away from the other people. So thus, it makes it so when he walks out again, it's easier for him to be like, oh, maybe I was imagining it, because everyone around him acts like Mrs. Dodds never existed, but it makes more sense why they could do that when it was that she literally took him to a separate area away from other people to talk to him about this instead of having it in the open. That's one of the biggest problems with this series, is that it's push. And it comes from the idea that a Disney Plus show, so they can only do 8 episodes, because that's what Disney Plus does.
Don't see any other way other than rushing it. You could do it in more episodes.
This needed more episodes if you actually want to flesh out what happens in these moments. It's 10 times better in the book because of the reason that there has this aspect, and it could have been really interesting to see in the show, of him questioning whether what he saw was actually real or not real. Instead of this one, where it's kind of like she literally was just in front of everyone. Yes, the mist was hiding her from the common folk, but it doesn't change the fact that it makes less sense for them to be able to gaslight him when dealing with that. Next thing I want to bring up, and I've already talked about this in a YouTube short, is I kind of liked Smelly Gabe in the series. I found him to be kind of fun. But the fact of the matter is, he's not Smelly Gabe. He's not the same character. He's too weak, almost. And it's not that Smelly Gabe was really the strong guy, but the whole thing is, they built up Sally Jackson as a bigger, like, confident character, which I will get into a little bit later about talking about her. But because of that, they made it so it felt like more like she was a bully to him. When she says she's going to pick up sandwiches, he's like, oh, can you make sure they put the peppers on my sandwich? She can kind of annoyed with him. He's like, well, and he's like backing up, and he's like, I'm not asking for much. I'm just asking for them to put the peppers on my sandwich. And it's this kind of funny moment, but in the same way, it's like the Smelly Gabe from the book would not be backing up in fear, feeling like accused by Sally Jackson as much as in this series he is. And because of that, when at the end of the series, a little spoiler, when he gets turned to stone, I felt kind of bad for the guy, because he didn't really do anything bad. I kind of liked him as a character. Well, in the book, yeah, that guy. He's a jerk. And because of that, you don't feel bad when he gets turned into stone. Sally Jackson, I liked what they did with her character, but it's going to get annoying as the series goes on, because a really awesome thing about her character from the book, she started out, I don't want to be rude when I say this, but more Caloran type person, where she's just very almost shaky with her, like, she doesn't want to offend people almost type way of doing stuff. She's very quiet, and as the series goes on, when you get to the last book, you see this growth in her as a character, where she's still a very sweet and nice person, but there's this, first of all, she's the one who ends up turning Smelly Gabe into stone, and it's like a big moment for her of finally just getting over and getting past this abusive relationship. You kind of set up in the first book this idea of why she fell for someone like a god, with the way of she had a very traumatic past. And so you kind of have this extra layer of, it's like set up from the very beginning that the gods are not the best people. They're taking advantage of these people who are easier to take advantage of. I feel like by taking away that side of her, it takes away that whole aspect of the problem with the gods of taking advantage of people in their weakest moments almost. So I feel like that's a really important thing. I really like the added moments of Sally, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, wait a second. That's a problem that they're taking away the Salliness of Sally Jackson because they just need to make her a confident, independent type woman. And it's like, I don't know about that because that takes away from her character. And because of that, in that very opening moments of her, while in the book, Percy is too afraid to fully tell her everything. In this version, she cuts him off when he's willing to explain what happened. And she's just like, he's like, well, this, and he's about to say what happened. And then she's like, nope, let's go. We're gonna go on a vacation now. And it's like, he was about to talk. Why did you just interrupt him? He was about to tell you something really important that's important to keep in mind when going on this trip, because it leads to her almost dying because of this, because of Percy Jackson's lack of being transparent with his mother at the first place. Instead of making it so now it's her fault that he's wasn't able to tell about this. For the most part, the episode continues to, staying pretty true to the book. The changes they made. I feel like one big change they made through this and this is not just the first episode, but through the whole season, for the first 2 episodes, is instead of making it so it's this very slow build up to figuring out, where like Percy has to figure out, wait a second, I'm a demigod? Instead of being this big reveal in the 4th chapter when he finally realized, wait a second, I'm a demigod? And it's like this whole big thing of crisis in him, like, what? Instead it's like, she just mentions, oh yeah, your dad was a god, and then they kind of just have it so when Grover shows up, it's like this whole rush thing of, you're a demigod, you're going to this camp, this. And there was somewhat of a sense in the book of where when Grover shows up, it's like, we need to be in haste. But while in the book, it was this moment of, shoot, Percy, why didn't you tell me about how bad it was? And now, again, it's more Sally's fault that she cut him off. And for the rest of the episode, it's kind of really rushed with what happened. Big things I want to bring up about the second episode is, again, it continues the rushed moments of, by the end of the episode, he's ready to go on his quest. We don't get to spend as much time in the camp because of that. The other things I want to bring up is, while I really like Dionysus' character in the books, I found this version of him to be absolutely hilarious, with this whole moment of him revealing to Percy that he's his son, just so he can get him to go grab him a drink. It's a different version of Dionysus, but as someone who really likes Greek mythology, I thought that this was a pretty good version of Dionysus too. I could totally see Dionysus acting like this, so that was a big thing where it was like the whole moment of him like, oh, I'm your father, go prove yourself to me by going and getting me this drink. And then Chiron had to explain to him, no, he's not your father. He's only trying to trick. Dionysus just sat back like, oh, I had to try. I had a good chuckle over that. I really like that. The other big thing of this episode that I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to put out a YouTube short about this too, Clarice does not look anything like the book. I don't know why Disney has a problem with having bigger built bullies or something, because I felt like the actress did a good job playing a bully, but it took away some of the fun elements of Clarice that make it so she's the big husky daughter of Ares from the books. And because of that, it also takes away from the fight in Capture the Fly. It felt like it went by too fast. I feel like they misunderstood why Percy was really good at fighting in that moment. It was because of the water. In that one, he takes him out before really getting to the water. In the book, he's completely being destroyed by them, and then he gets into the water, and suddenly he has new energy, and he's able to take them down because he's in his element now. And instead, they're still on the bank when he fights them. Go watch the scene. He's still on the bank. He hasn't hit the water before he destroys Clarice's spear. He takes down some of the Ares cabin. All this type of stuff. All this happens before he even hits the water. So it takes away the fun element, and it kind of makes him more like a Mary Sue type character. And the only reason why he was able to take down her in the book was because of he was in his own element. He was in the water, and that's what led to Annabeth being like, okay, I'm gonna push you in the water again because I know this is going to heal you, because she already saw what happened with him in the water before. Now on to episode 3. And the big thing I want to talk about with episode 3 that stood out to me was the whole thing with Medusa. I felt like they revealed who Medusa was in the moment they saw her. They're like, oh, this is Medusa. And I felt like it took away from some of the fun of that chapter, where it was just like them trying to like figure out, I feel like something's wrong here, but I don't quite know what it is. Like, this woman seems very friendly, but also mysterious. I don't know if I trust her. And they took that all away by making it so, from the moment they knew who she was, and they still went into there. And the other big thing, again, this is the YouTube short that got over 10,000 views. An important part of the book with this is how Medusa keeps bringing up how she doesn't like Annabeth because of the gray eyes. But it takes away this element of like how she keeps bringing up those gray eyes. It's the thing I talked about in my YouTube short on this. I don't have as much problem with making her black. Now, a lot of people mentioned in that comment section that also I didn't really bring up this, but the blonde hair is important too. So maybe in the second season, they can give her contacts to make her have gray eyes, and then maybe give her a wig or something to make her have blonde hair. Maybe make it so something like in the second season, because she went back to see her father now, have it so when she comes back next summer, she has blonde hair, and the Percy's like, oh, did you dye it? And he's like, oh no, this is my natural colored hair. I just choose to dye it because I don't want it, because it really stands out a little bit more with, my skin color, having blonde hair and all, and I don't want to get questioned as much, so I dye it black. They could easily fix that by doing that. Again, I personally, and there are people out there who are just like, oh, she's black, that's terrible. I had no problem with making her black. Honestly, one of the big things about this series that is really annoying, and I'm going to put a YouTube short about this, is why do they take away every character that is blonde in this? The only 2 characters that are blonde in this series are 2 characters who were described to have black hair in the books. And don't get me wrong, the person who plays for Percy Jackson does a great job, and he's perfectly casted, but he also doesn't have the right color hair, so it makes it kind of funny how, in one way I could say, they took all the blonde characters away, but they did give 2 characters who didn't have blonde hair, so I guess they made up for it, but I don't know. I wish they had given blonde hair to more of the characters. But yeah, the big thing was the gray eyes. The whole thing with Medusa took some of the fun away out of that chapter by making it so they just knew who she was from the very beginning, so there was no mystery going on there of them trying to figure this out. Now on to episode 4. I don't really have much to say about this. I think they did a pretty good job. It was mainly them on a train and then being attacked by the Chimera. And then they did a pretty good job with the episode overall. I think the Chimera was really well created. I don't know, from reading Greek myths and all, I kind of had a little bit different idea in mind of what the monster looked like, but for the most part, I think they did a pretty good job with the CGI, and the episode was pretty good. Now on to episode 5, which it was a really fun episode. We got to meet Ares, and this is a completely different Ares to the book, but again, just like with Dionysus, I kind of liked it in its own way. He was a very funny version of Ares. His whole conversation with Grover was hilarious. And I love it how Grover had figured out he already found the lightning thief and let him go. So now they know that somehow Ares has to do with it, but they don't know why. And now they're starting to say maybe Clarice was behind it. And I found that was a pretty cool add-on to the whole thing. Now, the more I think about the amusement part, the more I'm like, okay, I actually didn't mind the change. Like, we had to meet Hephaestus in person. Thought it was pretty cool. Thought the changes to it was kind of, I don't know. I kind of liked the book, but I also found that this version of it was kind of fun as well. So I can't really say whether I liked the book. I might have to think about this more. Originally I put it down like, oh, they changed it and that's a bad thing. But now I think of it more, I'm like, I guess one big thing that was important in the book was it set up how Annabeth has a deep fear of spiders in that chapter, and they took that away. So that's probably that's a problem. But I thought that for an add-on thing, I thought it did a pretty good job, setting up other stuff for further on in the story, introducing a new god, all that stuff. I thought it was a pretty well-crafted scene for the most part. Next episode is episode 6, and the first note I have down on this is the club in the movie was better. Now, the thing about it that is, Then I went back, because I was like, I remembered it, like, oh, I don't remember it being that bad. So then I went back after putting down that note and rewatched it, because I'm like, I'm going to put a YouTube short talking about how the club in the movie was better, because the club in the show wasn't the best. And then I watched the scene again, I'm like, oof, that is cringy. That is, no, it is not better. No, it is not better. I kept that on my notes just because I wanted to address that as a funny little thing I wrote down that's 100% incorrect. No, the show did a better job with the club. I've run into people trying to say that the movie, that's one thing the movie might have done better. I think they need to rewatch that scene from the movie, because no, that scene was cringy. It was terribly done. Eventually I might have to review those movies, because it's been a very long time since I watched those movies. I think it was right after reading the books for the first time, and I remember it being bad, but now that I have a channel, I might need to watch them again to see how bad they are again. Really being able to get into the writing of it too. I don't know. I'll have to check those movies out sometime. If you guys like that idea, subscribe to see that when that comes. I'm kind of regretting that day. But hey, I felt like Hermes was cast well, but I did feel like adding Hermes into that scene wasn't necessary. They just added another god in, so you have another god in this one. Well, they could have easily waited until season 2 to bring up Hermes. I also found it kind of funny seeing Percy drive for the first time. That kind of reminds me of every time someone first starts driving, like, very nervous, can't figure out how to, like, I was always bad with slamming on the brake too hard, pushing too far down on the gas. Now I've figured it out more, but that's definitely a thing that starts with beginner drivers. Now on to episode 7. They made it so the gateway to the underworld was in Krusty's shop. They also took away Percy's big moment of him, like, tricking Krusty into getting into that bed, trapping him, instead of make it so just Annabeth pushes him down onto the bed. I see no reason why they needed to take away that from Percy. Like, it was a good moment for Percy. A few more big things that stood out to me about this episode was, first of all, they made it so Percy and Grover found out about the lightning bolt before going to see Hades. So it took away that, how they go in there and then he's accusing them and they're like, we don't have the lightning bolt. And then they reveal that, and then they figure out they do have the lightning bolt. And I guess that's one thing I can say that the movie did better, because I remember in the movie, they get there and then they figure out, oh, we have the lightning bolt, and we just took him straight to Hades. But in this version, they made it so they knew they had the lightning bolt, and they still chose to go to Hades because they get his mom, even though they figured out he didn't have the lightning bolt. But I do like it how they did add back in that Hades' Helm of Darkness was taken too. That was a good thing, and they also made it so he wasn't the villain. I also really like Hades in this. I don't think he's accurate to what Hades is like. I think that's one thing I can say. The book, I feel like the book did a good job. Somewhat. There's also problems with the books, and this is not a channel about books, so I'm not going to get into my thoughts about the book, but with how they treat Hades. But for the most part, I feel like the books are more accurate to how Hades acts. While in this one, he's more like every other god, but I also kind of like Hades in this. He was just so swag and awesome. The other thing I want to quickly bring up in this episode was that of how we got our first look at Poseidon, and we got to see how he does care about Percy, and he wants to help Percy, but he can't. And like, so he's like, oh yeah, I trust your, like he's telling Sally, like, I trust your decisions when it comes to our son, because I can't make the decisions on what school he goes to and stuff like that, but I trust that his mother can figure this out for him. So it was a cool moment. I like that. Now on to episode 8. The big things about this episode was, I felt like the Ares fight was not cinematic enough. It kind of just happened. That's the big theme, I feel like, of this whole series was, we have to get through this, and so they don't spend time on what they need to spend time on. I felt like Mount Olympus was too dull. I felt it needed more color, it needed more life to it. But I did find that Zeus and Poseidon were pretty well casted in this, and I liked them in it. Like, at first I'm like, well, I had to say that Zeus doesn't look anything like he's supposed to look like in the book, but the actor, and sadly that actor just died right after filming this, so he's not going to be able to come back for the second season. But he did a great job playing Zeus, and you got to see the, like, Zeusness in him. So I'm going to make that into an adjective, Zeusness in him. I mean, he was Zeus, and I felt like he did a great job playing Zeus. Sadly, he's he died. He passed away. So now they have to recast him. Hopefully they can get an actor who can look like him enough that it doesn't turn out too weird. But also, you're dealing with the gods, so it's easy to say they can take different forms, so he's just taking a different form now. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Last little thing I want to bring up is, the more I think about this, the more I'm like, actually I kind of liked it somewhat. I felt like and this is one of the changes I felt like was actually better than in the book. I felt like making it so how Luke just like casually pulled Percy away from the group. I felt like they did that better than in the book, where it's kind of like he waited all summer and then he like at the last day. Because then again, this is not about the book, but the whole thing with the Scorpion, and I felt like he did not do a great job trying to assassinate this kid. But on this one, he did a better job with this. It also kind of set up how he's like, I don't want to kill you because I need you. And that's something that, come to think of it, that the first book, why did he try to kill him when he knew that he needed him? I guess he might have been always planning on getting the Golden Fleece to bring Valier back from the dead, so I guess he didn't need him. While in this version, he's like very clear about, oh yeah, I need you. So he's not going to try to kill him. But so I also like it how Percy was the one who figured out, wait, you're the lightning thief, instead of Luke revealing it to him. But there's also the whole thing where his sword can actually open doors to places, which I feel like, no. The whole thing with the labyrinth, and maybe it's only that he can go through it. That would explain to maybe he can only one person can go through it, so he can't just open a portal and allow all his army to come in, because that's why they need a labyrinth, because it can't bring monsters through those portals. I don't know. They have to explain it more, but I felt like it was, no, they did not need to give that sword more power than they already had. I don't know. I didn't like that. So far, my thoughts about this first season was, it was way better than the movie. It had the problem of feeling too rushed. Everything is, this happens, this happened, this happened. And some people might like that. But I found like the book, and maybe that's some of my problems, is I'm trying to run a movie channel when I'm more of a fan of books. But the books does it 10 times better, where they actually take their time and you allow the characters to deal with what's going on. So that's a big thing. Tell me your thoughts below. Have you seen this first season? What's your thoughts about this season? If you guys like this video and you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer, Peter Wary, signing off.